This is a bridge on Interstate 95 in eastern Pennsylvania. It fell down. Surprise. The way that we treat surprises in infrastructure systems is there's always indicative of a dysfunction. And so to prevent surprise, we're going to improve forecasting. This figure represents the dominant model, which is driven by risk. It's a risk analytic paradigm. You calibrate a mathematical model with data from the past. Some user makes queries of it. Based upon those queries, they form expectations of the future, and then inevitably something happens that is outside the bounds of the expectations of the model. We call that surprise. Additional effort in improving the forecast will not prevent surprise because surprise is inevitable. It's time that we got better at understanding what surprise is and how to deal with it. And I'm not abandoning the risk analytic approach. What I'm saying is a resilience approach demands turning surprise into a positive event rather than always being indicative of dysfunction. So what is surprise? If you're American and you're my age, then this is surprise. This is Dorothy Gale, played by Judy Garland in like 1938 or something in The Wizard of Oz. She has entered a completely foreign environment, and it is her job, the actress, to convey to you surprise. Paul Ekman tells us it's a fundamental, a basic human emotion. It has a physiological response. The eyebrows go up, the mouth goes agape, even the arms open up. There's an openness of sensory perception. And like all basic emotions, it serves an evolutionary biological purpose. This is the prelude to one of the most famous cultural touch points of my childhood. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. It is incumbent upon the human being who is surprised to open up their sensory perception so that they can get new information that updates their belief systems. Surprise is when experience contradicts expectation. And a new set of belief systems can bring your expectations, your mental models, back in accord with experience. Surprise is not always negative. It has both positive and negative valence. So you've got to imagine our ancient ancestors and they come across the blueberry patch. Well, this is a wonderful surprise. They become attuned by this heightened emotional arousal to the sense or to the humidity or to the flora around them that might indicate blueberries in the future. But sometimes blueberry patches come with bears. So surprise can be positive or it can be negative. And the point is to open your perception, update your belief systems to learn as fast as possible so that you can improve your chances of survival. You don't always approach what could be a positive surprise with a resilient response. The opposite of that would be shock. In shock, you shut down your sensory perception. Shock involves denial of the experience. This can't be happening. I can't believe this is happening to me. I don't even want to hear about it. Shock, it would be the opposite of the resilience response. So now we see surprise has positive and negative valence. And a constructive, adaptive response to surprise would open up to new information so you could update your belief systems and change how you're going to approach whatever the surprising situation is. I want to show you some sources of surprise. These are not exhaustive, but we sketched these up on a chalkboard. They made some sense. This type of surprise, dynamic variability, the probability distribution you thought you were dealing with, and this is totally risk analytic, it's not the probability distribution that you actually have. This would be situational surprise when the events that you thought were very unlikely. So unlikely you may have conflated them with impossible. Actually happen more than you think. Another type of surprise, erroneous extrapolation. You've got a bunch of data and you're calibrating your model and you're like, well, sure. The future is going to be a linear extrapolation of the past. And when reality fails to conform to this erroneous extrapolation, you call yourself surprised. But there are other types of surprises. The fundamental surprises are those in which your understanding of the working system is just wrong. In a situational surprise, Some highly unlikely or improbable event takes place, and all of your efforts and the additional resources that you recruit to deal with it make things better. But in a fundamental surprise, because your understanding of the system's working is so bad, everything you're doing to try and make it better could in fact make it worse. One of those is an empathetic failure. You think that people upon whom you rely are going to do things, and they don't. Another is a lack of self-awareness. It's like that line from, that Pixar movie, you think you can do these things, Nemo, and you can't. You think you have capabilities that you don't actually have. And then here's the big one that relates to all the others, the hidden mechanisms and constraints. In complex systems, there is uncertainty, there are feedback loops, there are always mechanisms that you are unaware of and constraints that you're operating under that you don't discover until you attempt to violate them. So how are we going to get better at surprise? Besides reading children's stories, that McCloskey book, Blueberries for Sal, is one of my favorites because my mother loved it. And the surprise, what do you do when you see a bear in the blueberry patch, you know? The bear is surprised as you are. Well, these models, these narratives, these stories help prepare us, but there are other things that we can do. If we're going to pull the plug, that's a live event, and there are going to be consequences. It is unpredictable and expensive. But sometimes instead of pulling the plug, we just pretend we're going to pull the plug. We go through the story of the pull the plug. We role play pulling the plug. And sometimes, in even less than role playing, that is, we're not going to evacuate the whole building. We're not going to actually turn on the generator. We're just going to have a tabletop game. We're going to have a simulation. We're going to have these other sort of digital ways of experiencing a vicarious surprise rather than the real surprise. These different contacts with surprise would allow our trainees, if we could develop them properly, to gain the experience of surprise so they don't become overwhelmed and devolve into a shock response. No idea where I am on the time.
You're about 30 seconds.
Well, then there's so much more time for discussion. I can go one more slide, and I'm not going to show it. I want to know what we got for reactions first.